Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and this video is called Astrology and Magic as a Career. And I would put quotation marks on that as a career. I had a student of mine ask me this question, what I thought of esotericism, which I know about astrology and magic as a career. And I thought it was a really interesting question, and I wanted to, kind of gave him a long answer, and I decided, you know what, I should make a video about this. So the first thing I would say about this is that I don't think you can think of astrology, magic, or esotericism in general as a quote career, because I think people seem to be programmed for. I mean, I certainly was, and this was whatever 30 years ago, 40 years ago. When I was in high school and going to college, was this idea of a career, and I'm not sure how true it was even then. It's certainly become fallen apart these days. But the idea was that you get good grades, you go to a good college, you get a good job, and then you get this career, and then they pay you, and so a career basically consists of all you got to do is just basically apply for the job, you get the job, and then they provide you with everything. And you instantly are getting this, big salary or whatever they're paying you. You have a very specific job responsibility and stuff that you have to do. And then you get, like I said, you get the salary, you get the benefits, and it's basically all laid out for you. All you got to do is show up to work, do your job, and then you're going to be successful. Now, obviously what's happened in the work field is that people do not have jobs for life anymore. Just that's from what 1950 or something. So that doesn't happen anymore. And even the job thing is you kind of have the illusion of having this steady paycheck, but you can get fired at any moment. I mean, people getting laid off all the time, middle management, whatever. This very very it seems sure, but pretty much everybody is at some point is going to get laid off or have to find a new job, and people jump from job to job. But anyhow, the basic thing about the career is that it's all done for you. Like I said, all you got to do is show up and get the job, and then you just got to work. Um, the Clearly, it's funny because I remember getting an email from somebody, this is years ago, asking me about astrology jobs, you know, and there aren't any. And that was one of the things that was kind of odd about that Kepler College. They never really got it off the ground. They only had provisional certification. But the point of going to college is really not to learn anything, because you just kind of learn it for the test and forget about it. It's to get good grades and to have the reputation of the college or school you go to, and then get a good job. And astrology, there's no astrology jobs. So I always thought that was kind of odd that because that's what you're paying all this extra money for. I mean, it's very, very expensive going to college, considering the skill, the supposed skills and stuff you get out of it. I know at law school where I went, I was completely fed up by the time I got out. It was quite expensive. I took out all these big loans, and I didn't learn anything that was practical at all. I mean, I probably could have learned everything useful at law school in probably, maybe a semester, half a semester. So that was a very frustrating process, but I had to go through it to get the job. Astrology, magic, esotericism, this is all stuff you're going to have to be doing on your own. So that's completely different. This means you have to be an entrepreneur. So, basically you're going to have to go out and create your life for you. Basically the income and the career or whatever is something that you've created yourself. So you have to be an entrepreneur. And so basically, and I look at what people are doing out there. I mean, most people, astrology or magic or whatever, esotericism, is a hobby that they spend money on. It costs them money. There's a small number of people that actually, that use it as a side gig. I mean, that's sort of going on. Even then, I wonder how much people are actually making money. And there's an even tinier percentage of people that are making a middle class living on it. Now, as one person who's been able to do that, I don't make money as an attorney. That's basically my hobby. I have for the past 20 years or so have supported myself and this house and everything. I mean, it's to have a middle class existence, nothing fancy or whatever. But I've supported myself as a astrologer and astrological magician. So as I said, basically the difference is that for example, you really have to start it off as a side gig. And that's what I did. I mean, I had had jobs and things I was doing. I was an attorney. I was doing sort of contract stuff. I didn't actually have a job. And I started off with doing, 100% astrology, 100% a law and no astrology, and kind of over a period of time, 4 or 5 years, switched that so that I was basically making my money from astrology and astrological magic. So the whole entrepreneur thing is not something that people really they're not really programmed for. I mean, people have kind of heard about it, but what do you have to do? People don't really know what's necessary for it. And so in terms of the astrology and magic, esotericism, you're going to have to be an entrepreneur, and that's definitely going to require some marketing skills. And I remember someone saying to me, "Oh, I hate marketing." I said, "Well, you might as well forget about it. You're never going to be able to be successful at this because you have to be at least interested and work at marketing. The better you are at it, the more you enjoy it, the easier this whole thing is going to be for. I actually like doing it. I mean, for myself, if I'm talking about my own products and services and Renaissance astrology and things that I do, I like talking about it. I'm very enthused and passionate about it. And I think that's basically what it takes. You really ought to be able to be enthused and communicate what you're doing clearly. If you can't do that, then that's obviously a problem. But that's what we're talking about as far as marketing. Basically, in terms of I said astrology, magic, and esotericism, there's kind of there's a continuum. And you can be really mediocre as an astrologer or astrological esotericist, but really, really good at marketing, good at selling stuff. Or you can be on the other end of the spectrum, which is really good as an esotericist or astrologer or magician, but you still have to do marketing. Um, so, um, to succeed at this, you really need to offer a wide variety of products and services, and you have to constantly be innovating and adding new ones. I mean, I've got stuff that I have to constantly be coming up with new stuff. Whether you're talking about talismans, we're talking about products and services, we're talking about courses, books, things like that. You have to have a really wide range of stuff that you're offering, and you have to always be innovating. I mean, the stuff that sold 5 years ago really well, no one wants to buy anymore. And it's just one of those things. Is like it's a constant sort of process of invention and rediscovery and adaptation to what people are interested in. The other thing I would say is that it's one of the secrets of my success has been that I try to handle everything myself. Okay. And again, this goes very much against the conventional approach. The conventional approach is that you should just hire other people or buy stuff, okay? And that's the way a conventional business does it, and that's why a conventional business is so expensive. You have to go get a small business, loan. Then they go bankrupt because they have huge overhead costs. So, for example, you really want to be able to be hands-on with your web design. You're going to have a website. That's sort of a key point of contact. No matter what else you're doing, there needs to be some place people can go to buy stuff. It's basically going to be through the website. Um, Web design now is way too complicated for people to do. I mean, 25 years ago, I could able to do it myself because it was simple. Essentially, what you're going to need to do is get one of these services and get a template. But you do need to be able to work with that template. If you're having to hire somebody, because every single day I'm making changes to my website, updating prices, changing things around, correcting mistakes, adding and subtracting stuff. You really need to be able to be hands-on with that web design and the maintenance. The other thing is social media. And because before I get into this, I mean, I've had people say to me, "Oh, I've got this great idea. I'm going to have a magic shop." It's like that's totally crazy. You do not want to ever have anything brick and mortar. The only reason you could do that would be as maybe a sort of stage front when you're already pretty successful for your internet business. I mean, it's kind of cool. Remember Lucky Mojo, which is like a hoodoo place. They have this kind of cool, shop, and people can come and visit it, and they can have pictures of it and stuff. But the vast majority of their business is internet. I mean, the physical presence is only basically a way of kind of giving a stage presence or a sort of theatrical thing, a physical locus to this much bigger online business. So really, if you're going to be serious about this, it's gone. Forget about shops, and that's totally like 1970 anyway. I mean, unless you're like New York City, you're not going to get enough foot traffic or people coming to you in your area to be able to support yourself. And then the overhead costs are just out of control. I mean, you have to rent a building, you got to pay all the costs for that. It's hugely expensive. I mean, my overhead, has typically been, a couple $100s a month, and it's basically just web hosting and, paying for certain things that I have to have as far as like, PayPal or whatever in terms of the credit card processing. But obviously now you're going to have to be doing lots of social media. I mean, this is just how people communicate nowadays. It's how products are sold and services are sold. You really have to be into the social media. Um, you want to handle as much as you possible your finances and business and things like that. And you can do your taxes yourself if you can, you need to figure out how to do that if you can. The more of this you say, I don't want to deal with, then you higher overhead it is, and the less chance you're going to be of being successful. The other thing I would say is that customer service. I mean, everybody's used to being a customer and being catered to. Now you got to be on the other end of that. You got to cater to people. And so customer service, I mean, I have great customers. I would say 95% of my customers are great, but that 5% can really be problematic. Another thing that, that you have to deal with is shipping. I mean, shipping and logistical stuff is really hugely complicated and problematic sometimes. I mean, every single thing every time you deal with a customer, you got to be able to look up their order. You got to find out what's going on. If the shipping's gone wrong, you got to be able to deal with that. This is just, the shipping stuff is really is a huge headache. And again, if you're saying, oh, I'll have Amazon do it, then you've got this big bite that's taken out of your profit. So it's very easy to go from, even if you're making a decent amount of money, to paying people to do all sorts of different stuff because you're not doing it yourself or you don't know how to do it. So that's what I would say is you really need to do it yourself. One of my secrets, again, is to try not to spend any money on anything at all. Basically, focus on sweat equity, okay? I do tremendous amount of work of my own, things that I come up with. I do the work myself. I learn stuff. I learn how to do it myself. Do everything you can as much as possible yourself, and learn how to do it if you can. The reality of this is that, like I said, the idea that you're going to be able to step out of some full-time job within, the next day and have this sort of, turnkey business that's just going to pop up, and it's going to be really fun because it's esoteric, astrology stuff. You like astrology, and you're going to be able to do this quick business that's really profitable instantaneously is totally an illusion. What you need to do, and this is exactly what I did, is like I said, start out as a side gig. Build it up on the side, do it on the side, and then see if you can build it up over an extended period of time. Maybe it would be a couple years before you'd be able to do it. It's not instant, and this is what people do, is that they live paycheck to paycheck. They don't have any money saved up, and if they lose that job, they're in a total disaster. Basically, and again, this is what I've done even as I've become more successful as a business. I save a huge amount of my income, and we live extremely frugally because I never know when this is going to end. You never know if there's going to be a problem or something that's going to go belly up. It's very much like my grandfather back in the Depression. They had a small business and they didn't ever go on vacation. They worked basically every day. They worked, dawn to dusk. They worked super hard, and they were able to be successful with it even through the Depression. But that's really what it takes, is super hard work and frugality. But ultimately, what I would say about it is that the key to it is to be able to innovate and have your own unique brand, okay, and your unique products and services. That really is going to be the key to success. And for me, it was basically like I had to succeed. I had no choice because I got fired or laid off from every single job I ever had. I mean, I have not had a job in 30 years. I just couldn't do it. And so I basically it was freaked out at the time, but I had no choice but to go out and do this myself. And again, like I said, I do every single thing myself. All the, I do my own taxes. Do anything, I can handle that as an attorney. Anything legal that comes up, the financial stuff I'll handle myself, marketing, all that kind of stuff I've always done myself. Now, part of the problem is I'm getting older now. I'm getting closer to retirement. If I was younger, I would be doing way more of a, refit on my website and lots more updating. But I'm kind of, to a certain extent, winding down. But also what I'm finding is that, if you were going to have a website now, you really couldn't do anything more than about 10, 20 pages. I mean, you could start putting some more content on it. You could not have an 800-page website like I do with Renaissance Astrology. So I kind of just leave it as it is, because otherwise that resource would not be available for people. It would be impossible. You'd have to be like New York Times and have this huge staff of people constantly changing over the content or whatever. It would cost you millions of dollars to be able to have an 800-page website. So like I said, the key to this is, like I said, having a unique brand and being willing to innovate. One of the things that I have to say to people, I have to really I want to put this out there, is that, some people have this idea that they'll take my Astrological Magic course and there they go. They'll get all the stuff they need. They'll have all the images and pictures and everything and ritual, and they can just take that and then they can start selling it themselves. They've got a great idea. I'll just take everything that Chris did and I'll just take it myself and I'll start selling it myself. So that, that's basically like, I've got a bakery shop and you get a job at the bakery, learn all my recipes, and then you set up a store next door and you just try to put me out of business because taking my recipes. This is not going to be viable for anybody. So what I have in the course is that in order to take the course, you have to agree not to go into competition with me directly on the stuff that I do. Now, if you do finish the course and you want to do astrological magic, I'm happy to sit down and discuss with people how to do a practice that you could do that would not be directly competing with me. Okay? And so there's lots of stuff you can do. There's all sorts of possibilities that you could come up with as long as you're not doing the stuff that I'm doing. And again, I'm happy to talk to people about that. But again, that is not an option. Okay? This is not taking all my hard work and knowledge and everything that I've established over 30 years and then just selling it for your own thing. It wouldn't work anyway. And, basically I've got the brand. I've built this up. But the key to my success was I was not doing what everyone else is doing. And again, as I look out with astrological magic, what I see is that essentially people use the methodology that I have in terms of the elections. The marketing is similar, but what people do is popify it. They just, whatever the flavor of the month is or whatever, they do that. And they just kind of water down the traditional astrology and focus on that. I mean, there's plenty of people out there doing interesting stuff and good stuff. I don't want to denigrate anybody, but again, the people that I think have been most successful in doing this have come up with a unique approach that is different from what I do. And so I have a lot of respect for that. And I think it's really cool that people are doing stuff that they're not just being duplicative. They've had some creativity. So, I think that, what I would say about it is that I think that, most people, like I said, this is never going to be anything more than a hobby for your own interest that you spend money on. Again, a few people, like I said, the way to start working on this is to think of it as a side gig. And then to come up with your own unique approach. Now, for example, I have a friend who's a licensed counselor, and he has, basically his counseling practice, and he's Buddhist. It fits really well with astrology. So he does readings that fit in with his counseling practice, and that's a great way for him to market the astrology because hey, he's a licensed counselor. And it again fits really well with the modern psychological astrology. And he's mixed in the Buddhist and has a meditative approach. So, I mean, this is really something exciting and new and different. Very interesting, that he was able to come up with that. And so that's, certainly somebody, again, he still makes the majority of, he's still a counselor for the most of what he's doing. But again, this is the sort of approach that I would recommend that people take. What are you really interested in? What do you have that's unique? What is your unique background? What are the things you can put together and come up with that? Because I remember not too long ago, someone, I was taking the Astrological Magic course with the expectation, again, they could sell it and we could immediately make money off of it. And I told them they couldn't do that. And at first they were disappointed, but I said to them, look, I said, the secret of your success is going to be coming up with your own unique branding and your own unique products. And so what seems to be at this point is disappointing to you actually is the key to your success. And so that's what I would say about it. Think of it as a side gig. Think of your own unique stuff that you can come up with that's completely different from what anyone else is doing. And then you're going to be able to be successful with it. And so there are going to be people eventually that are going to come up with, take the side gig and then expand it out to, being a larger business. Most of that comes from combining a lot of different, it's almost like I have multiple side gigs. They go on, I call it a raccoon strategy. Sort of, you have to be small, you have to be omnivorous, you eat lots of different stuff. You get in the dumpster and you gorge yourself until they bang on it and you jump it out and you go eat somewhere else. That's been sort of how I've gone about it because you really have to be adept if you're taking care of yourself. If you're a domesticated animal or whatever, you're just getting fed, but you're going to be locked up, you're neutered, your nails are clipped and you're on a leash. So I've always been a little more wild and free, but that means you got to go out and forage for yourself and take care of yourself. So some people out there, I think the people that, like me, that do that, it's because they have no other choice. It's a heck of a lot easier just to get a job, and do it that way. But nevertheless, this, like I said, I thought it would be useful to give my take on what it would take to, essentially make a living as an astrologer or astrological magician, or just as an esotericist in general. So again, I hope you find that interesting and useful. I hope some people find it inspiring, and I certainly think that it's it's doable, but you really have to focus on it and make it sort of your life's work, so to speak. So again, I hope you found that interesting and useful, and just also kind of a recap of how I got to where I am.